Okay, today we're going to continue our work with number lines, and our lesson objectives today are to use negative numbers to represent real-world quantities and represent, compare, and order positive and negative numbers on a number line. Our standards that we'll be covering are here below. We have a pretty lengthy list of standards, but most of them are similar to what we did in our first lesson with number lines. And we do have a few more standards included, and we have the ones that deal with negative numbers. So these are our standards that we're going to meet in this lesson. So you can use positive and negative numbers to represent many real-world situations. One example is if you're measuring temperature. As we know here in Illinois, during the winter we can drop below zero in temperature. So maybe you were recording temperatures at different times, and if it's below zero, you would use a negative number, like at 12 a.m. or midnight, and 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. All those temperatures were below zero at -5, -12, and -8. And then temperatures above zero, you would record as a positive number, just like you have at noon, 4 p.m., and 8 p.m. You can use them to represent gains or losses. Football season is starting up here, and so if a player loses 15 yards, we would say that he gained -15 because he lost yardage there. And if he gains 30 yards, we would use a positive 30. So a loss would be represented by a negative number and a gain by 30. You can use positive and negative numbers when working with a certain value, such as sea level. So if it's below sea level, you'd write that as a negative number. So 52 feet below sea level would be written as -52. And 7,310 feet above sea level would be represented by a positive 7,310. And you can use it for debits and credits. A debit is amount someone owes, and a credit is an amount owed back. So -180 would mean a debit of $180, and $79 would mean a credit of $79. So for each situation, we would want to write a positive or negative number to represent it. So in our first situation here, if it's 36 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, below is our key word there. Since it's below zero, our number would be -36. If we have a debit of 10,540, well, on the previous page, it was explained that a debit is a negative number. So we would have -10,540. If we're at 29,035 feet below sea level, we would be at -29,035. And if we have a gain of 45 yards, we could just write 45, or you could write positive 45. Either one of those would work. And we have a table here with 4 different locations along with their elevations, and we have some questions in regards to those 4 locations. So number 5, we just need to fill in the blank. New Orleans is 8 feet below sea level. We know it's below because we see the value for New Orleans is -8. Mount Davidson is 928 feet above sea level. We just use that value and plug that in. The deepest location among the 4 locations is Death Valley. I'm going to abbreviate Death Valley with a DV. Deep, we're going down into the ground, and so Death Valley would be the lowest in the ground. The highest location among the 4 locations will be Pilot Mountain. And again, I'm going to abbreviate here. And if it's highest, that means it's above sea level, and that's the highest number. And the location nearest to sea level is New Orleans. And again, I'm abbreviating there. And we're talking about nearest or closest to sea level, and -8 would be the closest to sea level, which is 0. Excuse me. We can put negative numbers on a number line just like we can with our positive numbers. So we have our number line here that has extended to the negatives. You can think of 0 as kind of like a mirror, and it's reflecting across. So since positive 1 is closest to 0, negative 1 would be closest to 0. Since 2 is the next closest to 0, negative 2 would be the next closest to 0, and so on. It's like it's a reflection across 0. As you move to the right on a horizontal number line, the values increase or become greater, and then as you move to the left, they decrease. 4 is farther to the right on a horizontal number line than 1, so that's why 4 is greater than 1. And negative 4 is farther left on a horizontal number line than negative 1, so that's why negative 4 is less than negative 1. Make sure that your negative numbers are placed to the left of 0 on a horizontal number line, and the lesser number always lies to the left of the greater. It's the same idea here on a vertical number line, but instead of horizontal, it runs vertically, and again, the lowest number is at the bottom. For every positive, there's a corresponding negative. So for positive 3, its corresponding is negative 3, and so they are opposites of one another. So every positive number has an opposite. So positive 3 opposite is negative 3. Negative 13's opposite is positive 13, and so on. 0, though, is neither positive nor negative. 0 is its own opposite, or you could even say that 0 has no opposite. So here we want to draw a horizontal number line. Horizontal, if you remember from our previous lesson, horizontal line goes left to right. We want to represent the numbers from means we include those numbers, 0 to 6, and their opposites. Okay, so we start on the left with our first value. So we want 0 to 6 and their opposites. Well, we should know that 6 is our largest number. And if 6 is the largest, its opposite would be our smallest number. So the opposite of 6 is negative 6. So you start your number line with negative 6, negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I need to extend my line a little bit. That's why I don't put the arrow on the end. 5 and 6. Again, you want to have that consistent spacing between your numbers. For part B, we wanted to draw a vertical number line. Okay, vertical goes up and down, and we just need to put these 5 numbers on. There's no pattern, there's no other criteria that we need to follow. It's just these 5 numbers. For our vertical number line, we do start at the bottom, and at the bottom of our vertical number line should be the lowest number. So you have to look at your 5 values here, negative 26, negative 29, negative 30, negative 32, and negative 34. And the first you have to determine which of those is the lowest. Well, since we're working with negatives, the lowest value would be negative 34. If you're not sure, think of all those as positive. If they were all positive, 26 would be the lowest. But since we're working with negatives, we're working with the opposites. If 26 is the lowest positive, negative 26 would be the highest negative. So you would put negative 34 at the bottom. Now, if you look at those 5 values, there's no pattern. There's no set interval that we are increasing by. So what I would suggest you do when placing these values on the number line is to include all values in between, except don't label. So I would count this next mark as negative 33, but since negative 33 is not in the list, I'm not labeling it. Negative 32 would be next. That is on my list, so I label. Negative 31 is not. Negative 30 is. Negative 29 is. Negative 28 is not. Negative 27 is not. And negative 26 is. excuse me, I need to fill in the missing values on this number line. So in this first one would be negative 13. And then between negative 12 and negative 10 would be negative 11. Between negative 10 and negative 8 would be negative 9. Between negative 7 and negative 5 would be negative 6. All right, for number 11 here, I need to draw a horizontal number line to represent each set of numbers. So horizontal goes left to right. I start with my lowest value, and I start with negative 8. Now, once again, there's no consistent pattern, so I would include all those values between, but I do not label. So if that's negative 8, negative 7, negative 6, negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0. Now, when I get to 0, if you want to put 0 on your number line, you can, whether it's on the list or not. If you're dealing with negatives and positives, I am perfectly fine with you putting 0 on your number line. If you want to leave it off, that's fine. It is your choice. So whether you put that 0 on or not is up to you. And I go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Again, I need to draw a horizontal number line. The horizontal goes left to right. I start with my lowest value, which in this case is negative 25. So negative 25, negative 24, negative 23, negative 22, negative 21, negative 20, negative 19, negative 18, negative 17, and negative 16. And finally, you need to write the opposite of each number. Well, the opposite of negative 14 is positive 14. The opposite of negative 9 is positive 9. The opposite of negative 17 is positive 17. The opposite of 27 is negative 27. The opposite of negative 23 is 23. And the opposite of 46 is negative 46. And that is today's lesson. I hope this helps.